Maid's daughter mocked for inheriting abandoned home. What she found inside shocked everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Imagine for a moment inheriting a house that everyone around you believes is worthless. Now picture this. A small girl, the daughter of a maid, receives the keys to an old, abandoned house. The house, once part of a sprawling estate, now sits forgotten in the middle of a quiet neighborhood. Its walls are cracked, the roof leaks, and the garden is overgrown with weeds. But to the girl, it is the only piece of her family's legacy. When she first hears the news, she's stunned, but not for the reason you might think. She knows that her inheritance is mocked by the very people who once ignored her. Her mother, a kind-hearted but overworked maid, always kept a low profile. The wealthy family she worked for never once acknowledged her daughter, let alone offered any real opportunity. To them, the girl was nothing more than a servant's child, unimportant, unworthy of attention or respect. When the family's lawyers informed her that the house had been left to her, the idea seemed almost laughable. She had never set foot in it before, and it was a house no one in the neighborhood cared about. The mansion had been abandoned for years after the family moved to a larger, more luxurious property. In fact, it had become little more than a symbol of what was lost, of a time the family was eager to forget. Still, there was a part of her that felt a spark of hope. For the first time in her life, she was no longer invisible. The house, no matter how dilapidated, was hers. No one expected her to make anything of it. The news spread quickly, and soon enough, the whispers and mocking laughter followed her wherever she went. The wealthy neighbors who had never so much as nodded in her direction now took great pleasure in pointing and laughing. "What will she do with that old thing?" they would say, shaking their heads in disbelief. "She'll never be able to fix it up. It's a joke." But little did they know, this house held secrets. It had been abandoned for years, but what no one realized was that the house was much more than it appeared. She stepped inside the crumbling house with no grand plans, just a curious heart and a desire to understand what had been left behind. The air inside was musty, the floorboards creaked underfoot, and dust seemed to cover every surface. But as she walked through the dark, cold rooms, something caught her eye. In the corner of one of the rooms, hidden beneath layers of old, forgotten furniture, was a box. The box was small, made of sturdy wood, and its surface was decorated with intricate carvings. She opened it, unsure of what she might find. Inside, nestled in velvet lining, were a series of old documents and a set of antique keys. At first, they seemed like nothing more than forgotten relics of a time long past. But as she sifted through the papers, one thing became clear. These were not just any documents. They were deeds, titles to properties, and investments that had been hidden away for years. As the weight of the discovery hit her, she realized that her inheritance was far more valuable than anyone could have imagined. This wasn't just a house. It was the key to a fortune that had been buried in the family's past. And soon, those who had once mocked her would find themselves stunned by what she had uncovered. As she stared at the small wooden box and its contents, the girl realized she had just stumbled upon something far bigger than she had imagined. The documents she uncovered were old, yellowed with age, but their significance was undeniable. She carefully laid them out on the floor, one by one. Each paper told a different part of a much larger story: deeds to properties, financial statements, and documents with signatures from wealthy businessmen, all pointing to an inheritance hidden away for decades. Her heart raced. This wasn't just about an old, abandoned house. This was about a fortune buried beneath layers of dust and time. For the first time, she felt the weight of her inheritance, not just in material form, but in the power it held. The house was not a joke. It was a key to something that could change her life forever. And now, she had the evidence to prove it. But as the reality of her discovery set in, a new challenge loomed. She needed to act quickly. She couldn't let the wealthy family who had always dismissed her see what she had uncovered. They would never have believed it if she told them, and they'd probably take it from her if they knew. The documents clearly showed ownership of several properties, but there was one name that stood out: her great-grandfather's. She had heard whispers about him when she was younger, stories of a man who was more than just a servant's child. He had been involved in a mysterious deal with powerful figures, and no one had ever been able to uncover the full truth of his involvement. Until now. As the girl pieced together the documents, she realized that not only had her great-grandfather been a key player in a series of lucrative investments, but the mansion she had inherited was merely the starting point of a far greater legacy. The house itself was part of a massive property empire that had been cleverly hidden from public view. These properties were located all over the city, and their true value had been intentionally obscured, left to be forgotten by everyone, except for her. For a moment, she sat back and took it all in. She was no longer just a servant's daughter, discarded and overlooked. She was now the heir to a fortune that no one knew existed. But with that realization came a new burden: how to protect what she had just found. She needed to find someone who could help her navigate this world of wealth and power. She couldn't do it alone. As she sat in the dimly lit room of her inherited home, she knew she had to make a decision. Should she keep this discovery to herself, or should she take a risk and share it with someone who could help her make sense of it all? As she glanced at the documents again, her mind raced with possibilities. She couldn't let this opportunity slip away. It was her chance to prove to the world, and to herself, that she was more than just the maid's daughter. She was about to change the game, and she knew exactly how to play it. The girl's mind raced as she sat surrounded by the scattered papers and old documents. She knew she couldn't just sit back and let this opportunity slip away. The wealth and power hidden in those papers were enough to change everything. But there was still so much more she needed to understand. How could she protect what she had discovered? Who could she trust to help her navigate this new world? She knew that the stakes were high. The family that had once looked down on her would not be kind when they found out what she had uncovered. The wealth they believed they had left behind, the legacy they thought they controlled, now belonged to her. But that realization also filled her with uncertainty. She wasn't equipped to handle such a sudden shift in her life. She couldn't even begin to fathom the steps she needed to take to protect herself and the fortune that was now hers. In the days that followed, she decided to seek help. She knew she couldn't do this on her own. The first person who came to mind was an old family friend, a lawyer who had worked for the wealthy family for years. He was someone she had seen around the estate when she was younger, always standing in the background, never speaking to her. But she remembered that he had always been kind to her mother, treating her with respect when others ignored her. The girl's heart pounded as she reached out to him. She needed someone who could help her understand the complex world of real estate, legal documents, and hidden wealth. When they met, the lawyer looked surprised to see her, but he was courteous, offering her a seat. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his voice calm and professional. The girl hesitated for a moment, then slid the papers across the table. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady despite the nervousness inside. The lawyer studied the documents, his face unreadable. The silence between them grew thick as he sifted through each piece of paper. After a long pause, he finally looked up at her. "These are legitimate," he said, his voice low. "What you have here is far more than just a house. You're sitting on a fortune." Her heart skipped a beat. She had hoped this would be the case, but hearing it confirmed was still overwhelming. "But you need to be careful," the lawyer warned. "There are people who will want this. People who will do whatever it takes to take it from you." The girl felt a chill run down her spine. She had been warned, but she hadn't truly understood the danger until now. As the lawyer outlined the steps she needed to take to protect herself and the inheritance, the girl began to realize how much she still had to learn. She wasn't just a maid's daughter anymore. She was now the owner of something worth more than she could have ever imagined. It was a lot to take in, but she knew she couldn't turn back. She had to be strong. For her mother, and for the future she was beginning to build. With the lawyer's help, she started to take action, securing her newfound fortune and preparing for the inevitable challenges ahead. Little did she know, the road ahead would be filled with obstacles that would test her in ways she never imagined. But she was ready. She had something no one could take away, the knowledge that her life was about to change forever, and she was the one in control of her future. As the girl's plan began to take shape, she soon realized that it was not enough to simply secure the inheritance. She had to protect herself from the dangers lurking around her. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind, reminding her of the risks she was about to face. It wasn't just about wealth. It was about power. Power that could bring people to do unspeakable things to keep it or steal it away. The once invisible girl had now become a target. Word had spread about the papers she uncovered, and soon enough, the very people who had once dismissed her were starting to take notice. They were watching her every move, and she could feel the weight of their eyes. It started with the phone calls. Unmarked numbers appeared on her screen, with messages that ranged from warnings to threats. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into," one voice said, cold and chilling. "If you think you're safe, think again. You're playing a dangerous game." The girl didn't let it scare her, at least not on the outside. She knew she had to be strong, but inside, she was terrified. For the first time, she understood the true meaning of the lawyer's warning. The wealthy family, the ones who had once treated her like nothing, were the same ones who could now threaten her future. But she was no longer a helpless maid's daughter. She had something they wanted, and for that, she now had a voice. The lawyer, understanding the gravity of the situation, arranged for her to meet with a private investigator. Someone who could help her trace the threats and ensure that her new life wouldn't be taken from her before she had the chance to truly step into it. The private investigator was a sharp man, well seasoned in matters of wealth and power. He didn't waste any time. Whoever is behind these calls is not going to stop unless they get what they want. "You need to be ready," he told her. With his help, they began gathering information, ensuring that the threats were tracked and the people involved were exposed. But even as she moved forward, the girl couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something deeper. The mansion and its hidden wealth weren't just important because of their monetary value. There was a legacy here, one that had been kept secret for too long, a legacy that could either save her or destroy her. And as the investigation grew, so did her understanding of what was at stake. The closer she came to uncovering the truth, the more dangerous the path became. She had to be careful, cautious of every step she took. The threats kept coming, but she refused to back down. This was her time, and she was ready to claim it. She was no longer a maid's daughter, but a woman in control of her destiny. And with each new revelation, she knew that the game was far from over. But she was prepared. The world was about to see who she really was, and no one, no matter how powerful, would be able to stop her from taking what was rightfully hers. As the girl delved deeper into the investigation with the private investigator, the true scope of the challenges she was facing began to unfold. The more they uncovered, the more she realized just how far-reaching the power of the wealthy family was. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. The control they had over people, the media, and even the legal system. The girl began to see the web that had been carefully woven around her and her family for years. The house, which once seemed like an isolated relic of the past, was now a symbol of everything they had tried to bury. She couldn't ignore the fact that the family had worked hard to keep their secrets hidden, and they would stop at nothing to protect their legacy. But she was no longer the helpless servant's child. She was the owner of something that threatened to disrupt everything they had built. The lawyer continued to help her navigate the legalities, while the private investigator dug into the family's past, revealing more and more about the complex web of lies. The girl learned that her great-grandfather wasn't just a silent figure in the background. He had been a key player in some of the most lucrative deals in the city, deals that the family had desperately tried to erase from their history. As the truth came to light, the threats grew more intense. Strange cars began showing up near the house, and the phone calls became more frequent. "You don't know what you're dealing with," one caller warned. "This isn't just a house. It's a game you can't win." The girl knew that these weren't empty threats. The more she uncovered, the more she realized that the family's reach extended far beyond what she had ever imagined. They had the power to ruin lives, and she was now in their sights. But despite the mounting fear, she couldn't back down. She had come too far. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her mother, for her family, and for everything her great-grandfather had worked for. With the help of her lawyer and the investigator, the girl made the decision to take a stand. They would expose the family's secrets, no matter the cost. She knew the risks. She knew that the wealthy family would do everything in their power to stop her. But she had something they didn't, truth on her side. And with that truth, she knew she had a weapon that could not be taken away. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the justice she was determined to see through. As the investigation continued, the girl began to gather the evidence she needed to make her case. The more pieces of the puzzle she put together, the more she understood the extent of the family's corruption. She was ready to fight, but the battle was just beginning. The family had no idea who they were up against. The girl was no longer afraid. She was a force to be reckoned with, and nothing would stop her from claiming what was rightfully hers. As the girl moved forward with her plan, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The threats were becoming more real by the day, but so was her resolve. She had come to a point where there was no turning back. With every new piece of information she uncovered, the more powerful the family's secrets seemed to be. They had done everything in their power to bury the past, but now the truth was rising to the surface. She knew she needed to act quickly before they had a chance to strike back. The lawyer helped her file the necessary paperwork to take legal control of the properties, but she could sense that the family wasn't going to let her take everything so easily. They had spent years protecting their wealth and influence, and they weren't about to let some nobody ruin everything. Meanwhile, the private investigator continued to dig into the family's activities, uncovering a long list of shady business deals and manipulations. It turned out that her great-grandfather had been involved in exposing a massive real estate scam decades ago, a scam that the family had kept hidden ever since. They had carefully erased all traces of the scandal, making sure it was buried under layers of lies and corruption. But now, with the girl's discovery, it was all coming back to light. The more the girl learned, the more the stakes escalated. Every step she took toward exposing the truth seemed to bring new dangers, and she had to be careful who she trusted. The wealthy family's reach extended far beyond what she had ever imagined. They had allies in high places, and they would do anything to stop her from revealing what they had been hiding. Yet, despite the growing danger, she was determined. She was no longer the invisible girl she had once been. She was someone with power, someone with a voice that could no longer be ignored. The girl knew that she couldn't do this alone. She needed to rally the right people to her cause. She reached out to allies who had once been in her mother's circle, people who had worked for the family but had been cast aside when they were no longer useful. They, too, had stories to tell, and their voices could help amplify hers. Together, they would expose the lies and corruption that had been hidden for so long. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. The family began to make their move. One night, the girl received an anonymous tip that the family was preparing to take legal action against her. They would try to seize the properties and force her out. She knew that this was it. The final showdown was approaching. She had to be ready. The girl gathered all the evidence she had collected, preparing to make her case. She would no longer be afraid. The truth was on her side, and she knew that no matter how powerful the family was, they couldn't escape the consequences of their actions forever. As she stood in the empty house, looking out the window at the darkened skyline, she knew that this was her moment. The battle for justice was about to begin, and she was ready to fight for everything that was rightfully hers. The girl knew that the time for subtlety had passed. As the threats intensified and the legal actions loomed closer, she realized that the only way forward was to confront the family head-on. The wealthy family had underestimated her from the start, but they were about to see just how wrong they were. She was no longer the maid's daughter who could be dismissed. She was the rightful heir to a fortune that no one had cared to acknowledge, and now it was her turn to make them listen. With the help of her lawyer and the private investigator, she meticulously prepared for the battle ahead. The evidence they had gathered was irrefutable, and she knew that the family's attempts to silence her would soon come to light. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had spent too long in the shadows to let fear control her now. The family's legal team was ruthless, and they had already started to make their moves, sending lawyers to intimidate her and threatening to seize the house and properties she had just uncovered. But the girl had one thing they didn't: truth. With the investigators' findings and the legal documents she had carefully collected, she had more than just a strong case. She had the truth on her side, and she would not be silenced. The court date was set, and as the day approached, the girl began to prepare herself for what was to come. She knew that the family would pull out all the stops to try and stop her. They had the money, the connections, and the power to make things difficult. But she had something more valuable: determination. The day of the hearing arrived, and the girl walked into the courtroom with a sense of resolve. She wasn't nervous. She knew that she was ready. The family's lawyers were already seated, whispering among themselves. but their confident smiles faded when they saw her enter. The girl took her seat at the table, her lawyer by her side. As the proceedings began, she listened carefully as the family's legal team tried to undermine her case, attacking her credibility and attempting to twist the facts. They accused her of fabricating the documents, of being unfit to manage the properties, and of not understanding the gravity of what she had inherited. But the girl was calm. She had prepared for this moment, and she knew exactly how to counter every argument. One by one, she presented the evidence, the deeds, the financial records, the testimonies from former employees, and the investigators' findings. Each piece of information was more damning than the last. As the family's lawyers grew increasingly frustrated, the girl stood tall. She knew that this was her chance to not only claim her inheritance, but to show the world that she was no longer the quiet, overlooked Maid's daughter. She was a force to be reckoned with. The judge listened carefully, his face unreadable as the arguments continued to unfold. The girl remained composed, her focus unwavering. Finally, after hours of testimony, the judge called for a break. The family's legal team huddled together, exchanging heated whispers, but the girl knew that their time was running out. When the court reconvened, the judge delivered his decision. It was a victory for the girl. The family's claims were dismissed, and the properties, including the mansion, were officially hers. She had done it. The girl had won. As she left the courtroom, the weight of the victory began to sink in. The journey had been long and difficult, but she had proved her worth. The family that had once mocked her now had no choice but to accept her as the rightful heir. She had taken her place in a world that had once seemed so far out of reach. She had faced the challenges head-on and emerged victorious. This was only the beginning. The victory in the courtroom was not the end of the girl's journey. It was just the beginning of a new chapter in her life. With the legal battle behind her, the mansion and the wealth it brought were now hers to manage. But with great power came great responsibility. The girl knew that she had to be careful. The family, though defeated in court, still held sway in the community, and they wouldn't give up their influence easily. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. As the days passed, she began to settle into her new life, but the challenges were far from over. The mansion, while grand, was old, and much work needed to be done to restore it to its former glory. She found herself spending long hours with contractors and designers, making decisions about the renovations and repairs. At the same time, she had to figure out how to manage the properties she had inherited. These weren't just any properties. They were valuable, with prime locations across the city. The girl had never thought much about real estate, but now it was her responsibility to oversee everything. The lawyer who had helped her through the legal battles continued to assist her, guiding her as she navigated the complexities of managing such a vast estate. As she worked through the details of the properties, she discovered that there was more to the legacy than she had originally realized. Hidden behind the glamour of the wealth were old business deals, shady investments, and connections that she needed to understand if she was going to protect her future. But as the girl began to understand the full scope of her inheritance, she also realized that the family's legacy wasn't just about money. It was about power. And now, she was in control of that power. The realization came with a new weight, one that she wasn't sure she was ready for. There were moments when the pressure seemed unbearable. The phone calls didn't stop. There were still threats, subtle at first, but now more direct. People were watching her every move, waiting for her to slip up. But with every threat, she grew stronger. She had proven that she could fight for what was hers, and now, she was ready to protect it. The first major challenge came when a powerful real estate developer made a move to buy one of her properties. It was a prime piece of land, and the developer was known for his ruthless tactics. He had tried to acquire it from the previous owners years ago, but had been turned down. Now, with the girl in control, he saw an opportunity to strike. He approached her with an offer, but she wasn't fooled. She knew that his offer was far below the property's true value, and he was hoping she wouldn't know that. But the girl had done her homework. She knew the value of the land, and she wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of her. With the help of her lawyer, she rejected the offer and made it clear that she would not be intimidated. The developer, surprised by her resolve, backed off, for now. But the girl knew this wouldn't be the last time someone would try to take advantage of her. As she continued to assert her control over the properties and the mansion, she found herself growing into the role of a powerful businesswoman. She wasn't the same girl who had been mocked and dismissed all those years ago. She was no longer invisible. She had taken control of her life and her future. She had proven that she was more than just the maid's daughter. She was a force to be reckoned with. And as she stood on the balcony of her mansion, looking out over the city, she realized that this was only the beginning. She had fought for everything she had, and now she would protect it with everything she had. As time passed, the girl found herself settling into a life she had once thought impossible. The mansion, now fully restored, stood as a testament to her perseverance, resilience, and the legacy she had claimed for herself. The renovations were complete, the properties were flourishing under her careful management, and she had built a reputation in the business world as a force to be reckoned with. But it wasn't just about the material wealth anymore. She had found something more valuable than money. She had found herself. The challenges she had faced had shaped her into someone stronger, someone who could no longer be overlooked. The once timid, invisible girl was now a confident woman who commanded respect. She knew that her journey wasn't over, that the road ahead would still be filled with obstacles, but she had learned to embrace those challenges rather than fear them. Her life had changed beyond recognition, and yet, in a way, it had stayed the same. She had always known that she was capable of more, and now she had proven it, not just to the world, but to herself. As the years went by, the girl, now a woman, continued to oversee her vast estate, making decisions that impacted not only her future but the future of many others. She had built a network of like-minded people, others who had once been underestimated, others who had been overlooked. She had created opportunities for them, just as she had created opportunities for herself. No longer was she just the maid's daughter. She had become an inspiration, a symbol of what could be achieved when one refused to accept the limits others placed on them. The family that had once dismissed her was now nothing more than a distant memory. They had no choice but to accept that she was the rightful owner of the legacy they had tried so hard to hide. The girl had not only taken what was rightfully hers, but had also turned the tables on them in ways they could never have predicted. She had done it on her terms. Looking back, she realized just how far she had come. She had fought for what was hers, not through violence or revenge, but through perseverance, knowledge, and an unshakable belief in herself. And now, as she stood in the heart of the mansion, overlooking the city she had conquered, she felt a sense of peace. She had earned her place. She had fought for her future, and in doing so, she had secured it. The girl, once invisible, was now the woman who had taken control of her destiny, and nothing would ever take that from her again. In this inspiring tale of perseverance and determination, a young girl, once dismissed and underestimated by the powerful family she worked for, takes control of her future. When she unexpectedly inherits an abandoned mansion, she is faced with mockery and doubt. However, as the story unfolds, this becomes one of the most powerful millionaire stories, revealing how determination can turn the tables and change a life forever. As she uncovers hidden treasures and a legacy her great-grandfather left behind, she faces numerous challenges, including threats and legal battles. But with unwavering resolve, she proves that she is more than just the maid's daughter. This journey of self-discovery and empowerment is one of the most remarkable millionaire stories, showing that wealth is not just about money but about taking control of one's destiny. Through hard work, strategic thinking, and a refusal to be intimidated, she claims her rightful place in a world that had once ignored her. As she manages her newfound wealth and business empire, she builds a network of others who have been underestimated and gives them the same opportunities she fought for. Her success becomes one of the most inspirational millionaire stories, demonstrating that even those who start with nothing can create an empire. With every step she takes, she breaks free from the limitations placed on her by society, proving that perseverance and courage can lead to greatness. This is not just a story about money. It is a story about reclaiming power, defying expectations, and writing your own narrative. Discover the transformation in this unforgettable tale, one of the most powerful millionaire stories you will ever hear.